Only few minutes left, God says, don't miss your chance. My beloved child. Those words seem to echo through the silence of the early morning, not as an audible voice, but as a deep stirring within the heart of a weary soul. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall continued its steady rhythm. Outside, the first rays of dawn painted the sky with soft shades of gold and blue. Everything looked ordinary. Yet something felt different. A man named Daniel sat alone by the window, holding a cup of coffee that had already grown cold. For months he had carried burdens that no one else could see. Smiles had become masks. Conversations had become routines. Deep inside, he wondered if his life still had purpose. He whispered into the silence, "If you're there, I don't know what to do anymore." No lightning flashed. No thunder rolled across the sky. Instead, peace slowly settled over his restless heart. It was the kind of peace that doesn't always remove the storm but gives strength to face it. Daniel remembered a lesson his grandmother had shared years before. Sometimes the greatest answers don't arrive as loud miracles. Sometimes they arrive as quiet invitations to keep walking. Those words returned to him with surprising clarity. He realized that hope often begins with a single choice, the decision not to give up. That morning, Daniel decided to do something he hadn't done in a long time. He closed his eyes and prayed honestly. God, if you still have a purpose for me, help me see the next step. I don't need to know everything. Just show me enough to keep moving. Nothing spectacular happened. But something inside him changed. The heaviness that had clung to him for months seemed just a little lighter. He opened an old notebook that had been collecting dust on a shelf. On the very first page he had written years earlier, "Dreams delayed are not always dreams denied." He smiled faintly. Maybe he had forgotten who he once hoped to become. Maybe life had buried those dreams beneath disappointment. But perhaps they were not gone. Perhaps they were waiting. As the day unfolded, Daniel began noticing small opportunities he would normally have ignored. A neighbor asked for help carrying groceries. An old friend sent an unexpected message. A child smiled at him while walking home from school. None of these moments looked extraordinary. Yet together they reminded him that kindness still existed. And where kindness lives, hope is never far away. That evening, Daniel opened a worn Bible that had belonged to his grandmother. Inside the cover she had written, "When life becomes uncertain, let faith become stronger than fear." He traced the handwriting with his fingers. Tears filled his eyes. Not tears of despair. Tears of remembrance. He realized that he had spent so much time asking why difficult things had happened that he had forgotten to ask what good could still come from them. Life had not ended. His story was still being written. The next morning, Daniel woke before sunrise. For the first time in months, he felt motivated to begin again. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because hope had returned. He made a simple promise to himself. Today I will take one faithful step. Not 10. Not 100. Just one. Throughout the week, those small steps began changing his outlook. He organized his room. He apologized to someone he had avoided. He encouraged a coworker who seemed discouraged. He spent time in quiet reflection instead of endless worry. Little by little, his heart became lighter. He discovered something surprising. Courage rarely arrives before action. It often appears while we are already moving forward. One evening, Daniel stood beneath a sky full of stars. He looked upward and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The wind gently rustled through the trees. No dramatic sign appeared. Yet Daniel understood something important. Hope is often renewed not through extraordinary events, but through ordinary moments embraced with faith, gratitude, and perseverance. He smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But it would also bring new opportunities. And this time, he was ready to meet them. The next morning, Daniel woke before the sun had fully risen. The quiet of the early hours felt different now. It no longer reminded him of loneliness. Instead, it felt like a fresh beginning. He stood by the window and watched the first light spread across the horizon. "My beloved child," he imagined hearing in the stillness of his heart, "every new day is another opportunity to choose hope over fear." Daniel smiled. He knew these were not audible words but a reflection of the encouragement he had begun to carry within himself. After breakfast, he decided to take a walk through a nearby park. Children laughed as they played. Elderly couples strolled slowly along the paths. Birds sang from the trees as if celebrating the beauty of another day. Everything around him seemed ordinary, yet he noticed it with new eyes. As he sat on a bench, an elderly man quietly took a seat beside him. "You look like someone carrying a heavy backpack," the man said with a gentle smile. Daniel laughed softly. "I guess I have been." The man nodded. Most people carry invisible burdens. The question is whether they let those burdens shape them into someone bitter or someone compassionate. Those words stayed with Daniel long after the man had walked away. Over the next few days, life tested Daniel again. An unexpected expense emptied most of his savings. A job opportunity he had hoped for disappeared. Someone he trusted misunderstood his intentions. Old fears began whispering again. "Nothing has really changed. You'll never move forward. Give up." For a moment, Daniel felt himself slipping back into discouragement. Then he remembered the promise he had made. One faithful step. Instead of giving in to despair, he chose to keep moving. He updated his resume. He called a friend he had not spoken to in months. He volunteered at a local community center, helping serve meals to families in need. There he met people facing struggles far greater than his own. Yet many of them still smiled. Still shared. Still encouraged one another. Daniel realized that hope is not the absence of hardship. Hope is the decision to believe that hardship does not have the final word. One evening, after finishing his volunteer work, a young boy approached him. "Thank you," the boy said. Daniel looked confused. "For what?" "You smiled at my mom today." She hasn't smiled much lately. But after talking with you, she did. The boy ran back to his mother before Daniel could respond. Daniel stood quietly. He had thought he was simply serving food. He hadn't realized that kindness itself could become a gift. That night he wrote in his notebook. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion becomes the greatest answer to someone's silent prayer. The days continued to unfold. Not every problem disappeared. Not every question was answered. But Daniel noticed something remarkable. The more he focused on encouraging others, the stronger his own heart became. His circumstances had not completely changed. He had. One rainy afternoon, Daniel received a phone call from an employer who had seen his application weeks earlier. "We'd like to invite you for an interview." He thanked them warmly. Whether he got the job or not, he realized something important. Opportunities often appear after we have learned patience, perseverance, and faithfulness in the small things. As he prepared for the interview, Daniel whispered a simple prayer. "Help me do my best. Whatever happens, help me remain grateful and keep moving forward." For the first time in a long while, fear no longer controlled his future. Hope did. And although he could not yet see where the road would lead, he walked forward with quiet confidence, trusting that every faithful step was shaping him into someone stronger, kinder, and more resilient than he had been before. The journey was only beginning. The morning of Daniel's interview arrived with dark clouds covering the sky. Rain tapped against his window as if reminding him that every journey includes difficult weather. Daniel stood quietly, straightened his jacket, and looked at himself in the mirror. Months earlier, he would have seen only his failures. Today, he saw someone who had refused to quit. He closed his eyes for a moment and prayed. "Thank you for bringing me this far. Give me wisdom, courage, and peace today. Whatever happens, help me trust that my life still has purpose." With that, he stepped outside. The interview went well. Daniel answered each question honestly. He didn't pretend to know everything, nor did he hide the mistakes of his past. Instead, he spoke about what those hardships had taught him: patience, humility, compassion, and perseverance. When it was over, the manager smiled. "We'll let you know our decision soon." Daniel thanked them and walked home. Days passed. No phone call. No email. Once again, doubt tried to return. What if this opportunity slips away too? But Daniel remembered how far he had come. He refused to let fear become louder than hope. Instead of waiting in anxiety, he continued volunteering at the community center. One afternoon, an elderly woman arrived carrying only a small bag. She looked tired and uncertain. Daniel welcomed her warmly and helped her find a place to sit. She looked at him with grateful eyes. "I almost didn't come today," she admitted. "I thought no one would notice if I disappeared." Daniel sat beside her. "I don't know everything you're going through," he said gently, "but I do know this: you matter. Your story matters. And today, someone is glad you're here." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I needed to hear that. As she left, Daniel realized something profound. Sometimes people don't need perfect answers. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to listen. That evening, as Daniel walked home beneath a sky slowly clearing after the rain, his phone rang. It was the employer. His heart raced. "Hello, Daniel?" "Yes. We're pleased to offer you the position." Daniel stood speechless for a moment. Then he smiled. "Thank you. I truly appreciate the opportunity." After the call ended, he looked toward the evening sky. His problems hadn't vanished overnight. His journey hadn't been easy. But every difficult step had prepared him for this moment. He understood that growth often happens quietly, long before success becomes visible. That night, Daniel opened his notebook once again. He wrote, "The greatest victories are often won long before anyone else can see them. They begin the moment we choose hope instead of giving up." As he closed the notebook, he realized this new job was not the true reward. The real transformation had happened within him. He had learned to keep moving forward with courage, even when the outcome was uncertain. He had discovered that kindness could brighten another person's darkest day. He had found peace that did not depend on perfect circumstances. Standing by his window, Daniel smiled as the first stars appeared in the night sky. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, new challenges, new opportunities to serve others. And this time, he was ready, not because life had become easy, but because hope had become stronger than fear. The road ahead remained unknown. Yet Daniel stepped toward it with confidence, believing that every new day carried the possibility of purpose, healing, and unexpected blessings. The first day at Daniel's new job arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation. He stood outside the building, took a deep breath, and smiled. Months ago, he had stood in a different place, overwhelmed by uncertainty, wondering if his life would ever change. Now, he realized that while his circumstances had improved, the greatest change had happened within his own heart. As he entered the office, he greeted everyone warmly. Some people returned his smile. Others hurried past, burdened by worries Daniel could not see. He remembered something he had learned during his hardest season. Everyone is fighting a battle that may be invisible to others. So he chose kindness. Days turned into weeks. Daniel worked diligently, listened carefully, and encouraged those around him whenever he had the chance. He wasn't the most experienced employee, but people appreciated his honesty, humility, and willingness to help. One afternoon, a coworker named Sarah quietly approached him. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. You always seem peaceful, even when things get stressful. What's your secret?" Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "I've learned that I can't control every situation. But I can choose how I respond. Every morning I remind myself to take one faithful step instead of worrying about the entire journey." Sarah smiled. "I needed to hear that." The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it reminded Daniel that simple words of encouragement can leave a lasting impact. Several weeks later, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. It was the director of the community center where he had volunteered. "We're organizing a neighborhood outreach event," the director said. "Would you be willing to speak for a few minutes about hope and perseverance?" Daniel was surprised. "Me?" "Yes," the director replied. "People listen to someone who has walked through difficult seasons with honesty." Daniel agreed, though he felt nervous. When the day arrived, families gathered in the small hall. Some had lost jobs. Others were struggling with illness, loneliness, or uncertainty about the future. Daniel stepped to the front. He looked across the room and realized that nearly every face carried a story. He began softly. "There was a time when I believed my best days were behind me. I thought every closed door meant my journey had ended. But I discovered something important." He paused. Closed doors don't always mean the end. Sometimes they prepare us to recognize the right door when it finally opens. The room grew quiet. "I also learned that hope doesn't always arrive in dramatic moments. Sometimes it grows quietly through small acts of faith, kindness, patience, and perseverance." Many people nodded. Some wiped away tears. Daniel wasn't speaking as someone who had all the answers. He was simply sharing what he had learned through experience. When the gathering ended, several people thanked him. One young father stayed behind. "I was planning to give up on a dream I've carried for years," he admitted. "But after hearing your story, I think I'll try one more time." Daniel smiled. "Keep taking one faithful step." That evening, as he walked home beneath a sky filled with brilliant stars, Daniel reflected on everything that had happened. Months earlier, he had prayed for direction. He thought he was asking only for help. Instead, he had been transformed into someone capable of helping others. He finally understood something that had once seemed impossible. The greatest blessings are often not the ones we receive. They are the opportunities we are given to become a blessing in someone else's life. Standing quietly beneath the night sky, Daniel whispered one final prayer. "Thank you for never allowing hardship to have the final word. Help me continue to live with faith, humility, compassion, and hope. May my life encourage others to keep moving forward, even when the road is difficult." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Daniel smiled. The journey was far from over. In many ways, it was only just beginning. Years passed, and Daniel often looked back on the season when he felt completely lost. At the time, he believed every disappointment was the end of his story. Now he understood that those difficult days had become the foundation of the life he was living. He continued working with dedication, serving his community, and encouraging those who felt forgotten. He never became famous, and he never sought recognition. Yet countless lives were touched because he chose kindness instead of bitterness, hope instead of despair, and perseverance instead of giving up. People often asked him, "How did you keep going when everything seemed to fall apart?" Daniel would smile and answer, "I stopped waiting for my life to become perfect. I started taking one faithful step at a time." His words spread from person to person. Friends shared them with family members. Parents repeated them to their children. Teachers encouraged struggling students with them. Even strangers found comfort in the simple reminder that one small step can begin a great journey. One evening, Daniel returned to the park where his transformation had quietly begun years before. The same trees stood tall. Children still laughed. The wind still carried the gentle sounds of nature. He sat on the same bench where an elderly man had once told him that invisible burdens could either make a person bitter or compassionate. Looking around, Daniel realized that he had made his choice long ago. He had chosen compassion. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and gold, he opened the old notebook that had traveled with him through every season of life. Its pages were filled with lessons learned through hardship, gratitude discovered in ordinary moments, and reminders that hope grows stronger when it is shared. On the final blank page, Daniel slowly wrote, "Every sunrise is proof that yesterday was not the end. Every breath is another opportunity to choose love over fear, forgiveness over anger, and hope over despair." He closed the notebook with a grateful heart. A young woman walking through the park noticed him and asked, "Excuse me, may I ask you something?" "Of course," Daniel replied. "You look so peaceful. I've been carrying a lot lately. How do I find hope again?" Daniel smiled warmly. "I can't promise that life will always be easy," he said. "But I can promise that difficult seasons do not last forever. Don't measure your future by your present struggles. Keep doing what is right. Keep showing kindness. Keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today." The young woman thanked him with tears in her eyes and walked away with renewed determination. Daniel watched her disappear down the path and quietly whispered, "May she never lose hope." At that moment, he realized something beautiful. Years ago, he had prayed for someone to encourage him. Now, he had become that person for others. The answer to his prayer had not only changed his own life, it had allowed him to become a source of encouragement for countless people. As darkness settled and the first stars appeared, Daniel stood and began walking home. His journey had taught him that life's greatest victories are rarely loud. They are found in forgiving when it is difficult, serving when no one is watching, believing when circumstances seem impossible, and continuing forward when every reason says to stop. He no longer feared the future. Whatever tomorrow held, he knew he would face it with courage. Before entering his home, Daniel looked once more at the night sky. With quiet gratitude, he whispered, "Thank you for every closed door that protected me, every delay that taught me patience, every hardship that strengthened my character, and every opportunity to love and serve others. Help me live each day with humility, compassion, and hope." A gentle breeze stirred the trees. The world around him was peaceful. Daniel smiled. His story had never been about chasing perfection. It had always been about becoming the person he was meant to be, one faithful step at a time. And so, a journey that had begun with uncertainty ended not with fear, but with purpose. Not with despair, but with hope. Not with an ending, but with a new beginning.